Hello everyone and welcome back to Young People in Politics. This week I am joined by members of the Anti-Conversion Therapy Coalition, that being Brian Crehan, Tiernan Mason and Inez Murray. The Anti-Conversion Therapy Coalition was set up as a cross-party political organisation with the hopes of one day outlawing the practice of conversion therapy in Ireland and Northern Ireland. As always, if there's anything on the show that interests you this evening, or maybe you just want to get in contact with the podcast, you can reach out to us through our business email, johnson.business.yt@gmail.com. And with that being said, please sit back, relax, and enjoy. Well, first of all, thank you all for joining me, all members of the Anti-Conversion Therapy Coalition, which I have to admit, listened to a few interviews that you've done before, and people have a real problem trying to get the name out of their mouth, to be honest, because it's such a tongue twister at times. I'd first of all like to just kind of go over, maybe if each of you could introduce yourselves. I know it's a cross-party coalition with people who are in parties and who aren't in parties. Maybe say who you are, maybe what party you're involved with, and then kind of how you came to join the organization as a whole. So we maybe start with Brian and then go to Tiernan and then Inez.
Hi, Odhrán. Thanks for having us. I know I've been chatting to yourself before. My name is Brian Crehan. I'm from County Kildare. I'm a member of Fianna Fáil, Nógra Fianna Fáil. I'm also a member of the SDLP. But I got my start in politics in 2015, canvassing for marriage equality. And I got involved through this just because I got in touch with our chairperson, Aaron Grant. And he said, let's do something about this. And we did. I'm doing a bit of the PR stuff, so handling Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, that sort of stuff, and reaching out to the fine media such as yourself.
Hi, I'm Tiernan. I'm from Dublin. Currently partyless in the south. I'm a member of the SDLP up north. I know Aaron from we both used to be in the Green Party together. And as soon as I heard, I was shocked myself to find out that conversion therapy was legal. So as soon as I heard that there was a group coming together to kind of fight it, I wanted to get involved. And I'm the same as Brian. I've been helping out with the PRO side of things, social media, Facebook, that kind of stuff.
My name's Inez. I'm from Loughbrickland, which is a small village outside Newry. I'm the third member of the SDLP here as well. I'm the current policy officer for SDLP, and I became involved in politics like I did the Anti-Conversion Therapy Coalition because I was just sick of how little change there was. And the fact that it is still legal, like it's not only shocking, but it just seems wrong. It's such a common sense thing. Like, why is this still legal? But I'm glad to be part of the Anti-Conversion Therapy Coalition. I'm glad to see that change is being made and LGBTQ plus people's rights are being respected.
First of all, I think to a lot of people listening, and when I throw out this question, just if you want to deliberate between yourselves as who probably is the best to answer it, I know it'll change depending on what I ask, but I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that conversion therapy is still legal in Ireland. I think you kind of nearly have to have your ears to the ground to kind of realize that it's still going on. And it's difficult as well because it's not something that a lot of people talk about. I think Ireland has a very unfortunate history of not touching those taboo subjects that a lot of the time are, we'll know, products of their time. I think there's a few points in the Irish Constitution you could probably point to that are very much out of date. That's, of course, a topic for another day. First of all, I kind of want to ask, just for people who aren't too aware of what conversion therapy is, really just, well, what is it?
So as a kind of baseline, conversion therapy is the idea that, or is a type of therapy that teaches LGBT people that it is wrong to be LGBT and that they need to be fixed and be made straight. So, it kind of was popularized when people, would come out to their families and their families would be like, you're not living with us anymore. So they'd be forced to go to kind of the stuff you see on TV and media where they're forced away to a camp and they have to, learn to be straight. But it's also, people reaching out to their local priest for advice and their priest telling them, well, you need to come to prayer group and, pray the gay away. And even, people reaching out to their friends and their friends telling them you need to be straight. Like there's the set therapy, but then there's also the societal stuff around it where, you may not be going to an actual therapist. You may just be going to see a friend who every week is trying to help you become straight. And, it's basically torture for LGBT people. It comes from the idea that there's something inherently wrong with LGBT people. People make the excuse, what if you don't want to be gay or you don't want to be part of the LGBT community? That comes from stigma around it. People, if they didn't face persecution as an LGBT person, they wouldn't seek to fix themselves or quote unquote fix themselves. It's this torture of the mind where you are convincing yourself of a lie to try and make, people around you like you better, or, make your religious community accept you.
Mm-hmm. Tiernan, you obviously mentioned there's a couple of ways in which conversion therapy is practiced in Ireland, but just so we kind of get a better idea, really, and feel free, any of you, to answer this question. What are sort of the main factors of or the main proponents used for promoting conversion therapy in Ireland to date?
Will I jump in there, Tiernan?
Go for it.
It's something I was actually looking at throughout this campaign, is trying to find evidence of I suppose the ways that it's done here. Like obviously in America, it's very well documented. There's cases of where electroshock therapy was used, and then just repetitive stress was applied to so quote unquote patients who aren't really patients because there's nothing wrong with them. But over here, unfortunately, there's a very dark religious aspect to it. Like we're all about like freedom of religion, if anyone's Jewish, Islamic, Christian, whatever. But as we've seen today, there's still people who are using religious fundamentalism to allow this to go on. Like Archbishop Desmond Tutu kind of came out and said that gay conversion therapy is inherently wrong. I think the figure was about 370 religious leaders came out in 2018 and said that it's just wrong. Like there are religious leaders from across the globe. Former leader of the Jewish community in Ireland has come out and said it's wrong. So it's kind of across the board from Abrahamic religions that it's wrong. So anyone using religion to justify this is wrong. A lot of it is localized, unfortunately, from talking to people, from people reaching out. A lot of it can be focused on more rural communities because, again, people are still stuck in the old way of thinking that there's something wrong with homosexuality or being LGBT. But like, it's not just in rural Ireland. Like there's cases of it in Dublin that were recorded. Like it's not as bad as the electroshock shock therapy that you see in America, but it's still applying repetitive stress and different techniques of pseudoscience to change someone to get them to deny who they are, and like as we've seen, there was an APA study called commissioned in America, and people who go through this are 8 times more likely to attempt suicide. So like that's how heavy this kind of thing is, and that's the toll it takes on someone's mind, like 8 times more likely. And like of a survey conducted of, I think the figure was 108,000 members of the LGBT community in the UK, 2% have undergone the practice and 5% have offered it. And I think the object of this cross-party kind of coalition should be that no percent ever on this island has to go through that or even be offered it. Because I think anyone who considers themselves an upstanding citizen in this country, whether it's Northern Ireland or Southern Ireland, Republican or Unionist, the day that anyone's offered or goes through conversion therapy is the day that we failed as upstanding citizens because of the facts and figures of how detrimental it is to people's mental health.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that number of 1,008. How recent is that statistic, you might be asking, Brian?
That survey was carried out in 2018 in the UK, and that would have included Northern Ireland. So it is closer to home than we think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so even an extremely high number, given even the date we kind of think we're in and the progress we've made with regards to LGBTQ issues in Ireland and in Northern Ireland. Sort of, obviously, I kind of want to talk a little bit more about the actual coalition itself, because, we've seen a lot of groups come together in recent years, and I think we're starting, and I'll get onto different groups that have also formed specifically in Northern Ireland surrounding this issue. And I'm going to kind of refer to your group as the ACTC because I feel like I'll be here all day if I keep saying it over and over again. Obviously, it's been mentioned that, it's a cross-party support. People who aren't even in parties can get involved as well. How did this sort of coalition come to be? And by no means is this a sort of a dig or whatnot, but why is it only happening now?
I think the how it came to be is I think we owe a lot to Aaron Grant. He's kind of the person who originally set it up. He basically just put out a tweet being like, I want to set this up, and it was really informal. We all joined the group chat, and then Aaron really took the lead on it, and was like, these are the roles, we're going to do this, and really helped formalize it into a structure. And then once we had a structure, we started doing work. I think the main reason it hasn't been tackled until now is just ignorance. Like I didn't, like, I'm an LGBT person myself. I came out in 2015. I didn't know it was legal in Ireland. I'd say most of our members didn't either, or else they would have been fighting for this for ages. I think with Fintan Warfield's bill and the UUP's can't remember the exact word, what it's called, a bill or whatever, motion up in Stormont, I think it got brought to a lot of people's attention where they were like, this is happening. You know, most people we talk to even now don't realize that it's still legal. So I think that's the reason it kind of only took off now, is it was kind of a good time when a lot of people realized this is happening and we want to do something about it.
And, you know, obviously the group was created in the midst of a pandemic, unfortunately, for a lot of us. And, you know, that puts limits on the sort of routes that can be taken by any organization now. I was reading a piece in the Irish Examiner, which had one of your members, Owen Fagan, speaking in it. And he was kind of saying, you know, it's fantastic to, you know, get all this online support, to be trending on Twitter, but, you know, so much as you get trending on Twitter, next week, you know, everyone's forgotten about it. So with this kind of in mind, you know, we've seen overwhelming support. I believe, you know, your petition is now over 4,000 signatures. So how do the ACCC hope to, you know, engage people outside of online activity, whether it's in the short term or, you know, further down the line?
I suppose there's two aims, I feel, from the PR perspective of this coalition. One is to ban gay conversion therapy on this island. Like, it's, you get what you get on the box. Like, that's what we are. That's what we want. But I think the other is that we're talking about LGBT rights again. Like, you know, the 8th referendum, the marriage equality referendum, but like, marriage equality was a long time ago, realistically, in the world of politics. Like, people have kind of stopped talking about the fact that Ireland is not the greatest place to be LGBT. You know, we have to start talking about these issues again. Whether it's how heteronormative the media is, or the stuff, even like the media we consume, such as cartoons on RTE and stuff, or even advertisements that are state funded, only featuring heterosexual couples. Like, we need to be talking about how things are impacting LGBT people. And I think this campaign, especially, like, you have people in our coalition who are heterosexual, who are allies, and then you have people who are LGBT. But like, it's one thing that we need to hammer home with this, is that it's not a LGBT issue, it's a human rights issue, it's a civil rights issue. Like, you know, it's an abuse on someone's basic rights as a human being, not to be assaulted and suck out to change them as a human being. And I think that's why we're working a lot with senators, TDs, MLAs, and political parties, but also we're reaching out to people like you, Odhrán, who very kindly had us on to talk about this stuff. And like, I was on KFM the other day, and Inez was doing stuff on her podcast, and you know, it's people just getting talking about LGBT rights again, because as we have to keep saying, the fight doesn't stop at marriage equality. As we now see, you know, we've a fresh fight now, and hopefully people will see that, and even after we get, when hopefully we get gay conversion therapy banned on this island, people find new causes and new things to just better the LGBT rights on this island.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, to be honest. And I think for a lot of people listening or even watching, they will, especially living in Ireland, of all the countries, Irish people are very much docile when it comes to really wanting to push forward a lot of change. And I don't mean that so much more now. I think our generation especially has put a great lot of headway into, you know, really progressing Ireland forward. But up until now, I think, speaking from a personal perspective, a lot of people have seen that, you know, Ireland is a good place to live in, but, you know, they fail to sort of see the idea that it could be better. And I think that's one thing that at least groups like this, and, you know, other things like marriage equality, the 8th Amendment, have really shown that there is a lot more progress that still can be done in Ireland, and of course up in Northern Ireland as well. Let's talk a little bit about, so obviously back in 2018, this was kind of a hot button issue again, and it's starting to see a resurgence now, and it was in large part down to Senator Fintan Warfield's bill, the Prohibition of Conversion Therapies Bill 2018. Obviously, I believe, at least from all the tweets I've seen, that the coalition is in full support of this, and, you know, the comments made by Roderick O'Gorman as well is also a very welcome move as well. But is there anything sort of, obviously, I presume you're all well acquainted with the bill at this stage, is there anything that, you know, the coalition want to, you know, see implemented into that bill alongside the stuff that's already been proposed? Or is it just a perfect
I
bill
think
as
that
is?
silence is kind of us just saying, like, you know, I think we're all massively impressed with Senator Warfield's bill. You know, there was talks of, you know, what kind of, we did kind of talk, and, you know, a lot of us read the bill and went through it, and nothing ever really came up that needed to be added. You know, just to commend Senator Warfield on the absolutely amazing work he's done on this bill so far. And, you know, we're think, you know, even outside our groups, the most important person to thank when it comes to this is Senator Warfield and the other grassroots activists who have been, you know, at this for years and banging on about this for, you know, years, and now it's finally come to fruition and come right to the forefront.
Of course, yeah, and I would encourage anyone who's listening to this to even give that bill a read. It's, I think, for a lot of people as well, when it comes to like looking at legislation, it's always very difficult to kind of wrap your head around, well, the legalese, for lack of a better term. But especially with Warfield's bill, I think there's a lot of, very easy to understand language, very easy to understand concepts and whatnot that he introduces. And this question was by no means to try and catch you out as to anything that maybe could have been implemented. I think Warfield himself has like looked at every single possibility, and I think that's a fantastic first step. One unfortunate thing has been, though. Are you going there, Brian?
No, I was just going to say, Odhrán, about Fintan's bill. Like it was co-sponsored across the board in the Seanad, which is a reassuring thing. Like when we went through it, members from Labour, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, and other Seanad parties did co-sponsor it. But again, it was Fintan who did all the heavy lifting. And I think when we seen Roderick O'Gorman coming out in support of banning conversion therapy, it was two very important people in politics. They were both LGBT, which is a huge thing for young LGBT people, because they see that there's actually LGBT representatives out there who get to the highest office in the land and who fight for their rights. But more importantly, one was from a government party and one was from an opposition party. So it shows that regardless of politics, regardless of your viewpoints, that we can all come together, no more than the coalition that we have here. We all just want this ban, because it doesn't matter about your politics, doesn't matter about any of your viewpoints. It's the right thing to do. So I think that's one of the, it's a fantastic bill, but the optics surrounding it for empowering young LGBT people to get more involved and get their voices heard is so important to highlight as well.
100%. I think the unfortunate aspect surrounding Senator Warfield's bill is the fact that it has been 3 years since it was first proposed, and it's now only at the third stage of the Seanad. And you obviously mentioned Roderick O'Gorman there, and I think anyone who's been keeping an eye on the government, whether they're a fan of it or not, knows that Roderick O'Gorman has been a standout with regards to, his position in his office and what stuff has been getting done. I kind of want to ask is, are you confident that it'll, that this bill will be pushed forward a lot quicker given the support of Roderick O'Gorman now, or maybe do you think it might take another year or two? And if so, what do you think can be done to sort of speed that process up?
I think with the North kind of passing their bill today, and it looking like even if it goes to another vote, or with the even you've UUP members who a lot of people would have seen as quite a conservative party, and Sinn Féin as well, they've people would have seen them as quite conservative back in the 90s and 80s. But I think with that passing through, I'm hoping that it will give this government the kick they need. It is in the programme for government to ban this. So I think the main fear for us isn't that it gets pushed down. I think the main fear for us is that someone in the government will try write their own bill, which doesn't meet the same quality and standard of Warfield's bill. Someone in the government will see this as an issue, see this as a way to get easy political brownie points, and write a really crap bill and try and push it through really quickly. And I think the fear isn't that they're going to spend too long, pushing it back, because it's at the front of people's mind now. They can't ignore it. The fear, I think, for a lot of us is that someone's going to try write their own bill and it's just going to be crap and it's not actually going to protect people.
Mm-hmm. Just obviously, I kind of want to talk a little bit more about the organization, and I really want to focus in on one point in particular, that it is a party affiliated organization, a non-politically affiliated organization, but contains multiple parties coming into it. I think that's a very important distinction to make, first of all. Sort of looking at it from that perspective, obviously there's multiple parties on the island of Ireland, that are involved in this. How responsible are those parties involved, in the coalition for enforcing a zero tolerance attitude regarding this topic in their own sort of circles or parties, and how does this affect their standing in the ACTC, if they, refuse to adequately address the actions of members, say, who defend, even some form or all forms of conversion therapy?
I think Inez is probably best to talk about the northern parties, but for the southern parties, I think a lot of them, have been, they've code of conduct, and I think a lot of that falls under like mutual respect and that kind of stuff that they have. Parties like the kind of right wing, really right wing far right parties, they're not going to care, but they're not in government and don't have any seats, so they kind of can be ignored like their usual nonsense. But I have to say, fair play, as someone who's not in a southern party, they've been I've seen all the parties handling this well. They've, been dealing with members who have been active against this and trying to talk down to them. And I think, every party can probably do better on, bullying and harassment. But I think a lot of them are kind of setting a baseline where they're like, this is, it's not even a party issue. It's a human rights issue. And we're not going to sit here and let you spout on nonsense. But I think for the North with the DUP, Inez might have a better insight.
In the North, I think it's pretty much the same. Like, we have code of conducts, and there is that kind of mutual respect. And I think people join the SCTC for a reason, because they want to ban conversion therapy, and they think it's fundamentally wrong, which it is. But if there is members within the party, I think, like Tiernan said, it's important, first of all, to educate them, to let them know why it's wrong if they don't already, because I think that's why a lot of us are in the group, because we know it's so wrong. And to try and get them to understand where we're coming from and where the SATC is coming from. But when it goes further than that, and when it is rude, and when it is just blatantly homophobic, and it's not just lack of understanding, I think then there's disciplinary action that kind of lies with the party themselves. Like, even Tiernan mentioned the DUP, and the DUP, although they did oppose our bill today, and I suppose we will get on to that later on, but they do say that they don't condone conversion therapy. They might not show it in their actions, but technically as a party they don't condone it. So I think they must have some disciplinary action that members must face if they are homophobic.
Kind of sticking on with Northern Ireland for a second, because I think especially and I'm nobody to talk about the issues in Northern Ireland given I'm living in Dublin from Sligo, I kind of want to talk about, it's easy sort of down in Southern Ireland to maybe look at the idea of you banning conversion therapy as very much the majority consensus at the moment. I don't think there's any party currently in the Dáil that's against it, but not the same up in the Assembly. Obviously you mentioned the DUP there earlier, who are a huge factor with regards to trying to get a bill like this, or a motion, like this, across the line. What sort of are the group's plans for lobbying politicians up north so that they can kind of see that conversion therapy is banned?
Well, today we had the motion in the Assembly, and thank God it passed. Without the amendment, it passed the original motion. And I think that kind of shows that there is, like you said, there is a majority consensus in the Assembly, but unfortunately there is some parties that didn't vote for the bill, and they say, the DUP says they're against conversion therapy, but unfortunately their actions don't really prove that. They proposed an amendment that basically would make conversion therapy, if someone did practice it, it would make it impossible to go against them legally. It would make it impossible to prosecute. And they also removed the bit that's saying that LGBTQ plus people don't need to be fixed, which they don't. They're perfect just the way they are. And that meant that they didn't vote for the motion. And I think up north, that definitely is an issue. But to try and fix it, like you said, I think we just need to educate these parties and to let these politicians know what the effect is, because like Jim Wells stated a lot today that he is straight, and he obviously doesn't know the issues that the LGBTQ plus community faces. And I think it's letting them know that these people are people and their sexuality is an important part of them, but it's not just the only part of them. This is a human rights issue. And it's not just for the LGBTQ plus community, it's for all of us. I think Brian said this on KFM, and he said it in the Crisis Cafe live as well. But it's not just an issue for the LGBTQ plus community, it's an issue for all of us. And it's an issue that all of us have to fight for and campaign on our politicians for. And I think an important part of that is the email campaign that went on from Ban Conversion Therapy. And I took part in it, my family took part in it. And I just sent an email to your MLAs letting them know the statistics and letting them know the facts and letting them make a rational judgment on that. It's not based on their religion or what they interpret their religion to be, but it's based on the facts, and it's based on the mutual respect for our LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters and family and friends and members of our community. And I think it's just educating them. I think that's the most important thing, bottom line.
Just to kind of follow on from that a little bit, is it, obviously when we look at the way the motion passed today, is it, given the fact that the DUP voted against it, and that it makes it almost look like that this issue is, almost a 50-50 divisive issue, is that sort of the case outside of political parties, or is it the case that, and is it the case that sort of maybe the DUP are just this weird radical element of Northern Irish politics that have a very stringent problem with this?
That's I don't know. Well, I think it's not really a 50-50 split, like you said, because all the other parties are in favour of this, apart from the TUV, but it's the TUV, DUP, and Jim Wells, who's an independent, but they all have very similar viewpoints. But the thing is, every other party in Northern Ireland is for this, whether they're nationalist, unionist, or other, and that's the thing that unites us. And I think in Northern Ireland, sometimes people from outside of Northern Ireland can think of Northern Ireland as, nationalist, unionist, Protestant, Catholic, and that's the only really issues we have. And there definitely has been issues there in the past, obviously, but that's not the only thing in Northern Ireland. We have other issues. We have other parts of our society that we need to focus on, such as the LGBTQ plus community. And I think that the DUP, like Cara Hunter said in her speech today, which was very, very good, and I would recommend you watching it, is the DUP is on the wrong side of history. And she said 2 words which I think need to be reiterated, but get real. Like, get real. It's 2021. This is not acceptable in any way. They say they don't condone conversion therapy. Well, if they don't, vote against it. Vote for this ban conversion therapy and protect the LGBTQ plus people in our community. I think actions speak louder than words, and I think they really need to kind of put their money where their mouth is and put their votes where their words are.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, ban conversion therapy NI, which is obviously another group that was recently established. How much contact has the ACTC had with them with regards to combating conversion therapy on not only a Northern Irish front but on an All Ireland approach?
Yeah, we were in contact with them. Not a whole heap of contact now. Obviously we're both doing our own thing, and they're based on in the 6 counties. We're an All Ireland approach, and as well as that, we've got parties and people from the south who mightn't understand the nuances or have the contacts in Northern Ireland. But we've definitely been in contact, no more than any campaign really, like even for marriage equality. I know there's different groups who are kind of pushing for that, but we're all working for the same goal. And I know they've been at it a bit longer than us. And I suppose a lot of what went on today was mostly in thanks to what they were doing over the years and what other independent activists were doing. But I suppose we're all just fighting the good fight. That's the main thing, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the other thing about the ban conversion therapy NI is they are affiliated with ban conversion therapy, which is it's an organization set up to ban conversion therapy in the UK government. So, I think, they're fighting for the UK to get it completely banned, whereas we're fighting as an all island approach. So I think, we're both good. We're both fighting for the same thing, and we're not stepping on each other's toes.
I think obviously one big thing that'll be looked at in the coming year is the fact that the Northern Irish Assembly elections are going to be happening next March. And, obviously I kind of want to ask the question, this is a bit further down the road, and that's completely fine if you haven't really thought that far yet, but have the ACTC or will they be looking into sort of drawing up a plan to support anti-conversion therapy candidates in Northern Ireland?
I might come in on that, Nez. I suppose from a southern perspective, because I know poor Nez there's might be a bit limited being a member of a northern party, but I suppose myself and Tiernan, for instance, we wouldn't be tied down when it comes to canvassing. Like, obviously here in the south, I can't canvass for Fine Gael because I'm a Fianna Fáiler, and likewise a Fine Gaeler couldn't canvass for Fianna Fáiler, regardless of whether or not it's for a candidate in the ACTC. It's just in our party rules. But like, this is an issue that we're really passionate about. It's an issue that's close to our heart. Like Tiernan Brady was talking to me about this issue, and the fella nearly had me in tears. Like, it means a lot to a lot of people. And like, politics sometimes is from the heart. You get emotive about issues. And I think you have to be fairly emotive about issues to go out in the pouring rain and Naas for 7 hours canvassing, knocking on doors, annoying people to get some lad elected to the Dáil. The candidates that I canvass for are candidates that I believe will fight for a better Ireland. And there's other great candidates who I just didn't get around to canvassing yet. But you know yourself. But I think as individual activists, there are people in the north and the south who really lent themselves, such as Cara and such as other councillors, especially in the SDLP, Colm Eastwood especially, who were very busy people, and they lent themselves to our little kind of organisation and give us all the time in the world. And we're so grateful for that, and people in the Alliance and even people in the UUP who did a lot of work for us. Like, obviously I probably wouldn't canvass for a UUP person being a Republican, but I'm sure there's people who will hopefully give them a bit of support for the support that they gave us. But as for formal arrangements, I don't think there's any plans so far.
Yeah, no, I think the organisation would probably act in a more advisory role, where we might have a list of everyone's track record on LGBT rights, or we might work up, you know, who do we know is in favor and who isn't. But I don't think as a group we'll be specifically promoting any candidates, because obviously we have members from every single party on the island, bar, you know, some small parties and the DUP. So I don't think we're going to be throwing ourselves into electoral politics. I think, you know, we'll probably have a list of who in the north and south, you know, is in favor, who's against, just as public knowledge. But I don't think ourselves will be like, right, you should go canvass for Colin Eastwood. He's pro getting this banned. And I don't see Inez kind of canvassing for the UUP up north. I think that might be a conflict of interest.
I think Tiernan and Brian are right. Like, it is a conflict of interest, and I know SETC is from people of all parties and no parties, which it really is a lovely thing to see people really getting on and don't get on in other things at all, like economic policy. But I don't envision either that the SETC would. But I think it's also worth noting as well that it isn't a majority in Northern Ireland. We saw that in the vote today, and it isn't the majority of parties either. Like, there's only really, TUV only has one MLA and then the independent, Jim Wells, and the DUP. That's really only two parties and an independent. And the rest of the parties are all in favour. So I don't really think we can endorse people, because then we'd be endorsing a lot of people. But I think, like Tiernan said, it's worth putting out into the public knowledge who voted for it and who didn't. And it's holding these elected representatives accountable. That's the most important thing. They're elected to this job for a reason, and they're elected to represent their constituents of all sexualities and of all gender identities and none. They're here to represent us, whether they like it or not. And to see some MLAs here today not even giving the basic decency of voting for a ban on conversion therapy, because this is the bare minimum. There's so many other issues that affect the LGBTQ plus community: healthcare, equality, access to employment, equality in the workplace once they get that employment. And I think this is only the starting point. We need to talk about this more. We need to keep talking about LGBTQ plus issues, because they're not going away unless we talk about them. So I think it's important that we hold those elected representatives accountable. And when it comes to those assembly elections, remember who voted for this ban, and most importantly, remember who didn't. And maybe think about not giving them your vote if they don't truly care about you and about your rights and about the rights of your LGBTQ plus friends and in the society as well.
I think it's clear anyways from listening to all of you that, you know, banning conversion therapy is obviously a no-brainer. I kind of want to say, though, the unfortunate case, though, is a lot of the time with this practice is that the reason it was first implemented was because of the view of society at the time. And, you know, maybe just to act on a presumption for a second, I'm going to say even when it is outlawed, because I do believe it will be, the unfortunate case is to be that, you know, there will still be a lot of people who stand by that act of conversion therapy and believe it to be the right thing to do. So my question is, how do the ACTC hope to not only just influence legal change with regards to banning conversion therapy, but how do they hope to influence societal change surrounding the topic?
I might jump in there, Odhrán. I think it's something that we could all touch on, really. I think it starts with the little things. Like we all have friends from across the political spectrum and people who don't have politics, and we all have friends who sometimes drop the odd homophobic slur, and like that's reality. And anyone who says different is probably lying or is very picky about who their friends are. Like obviously, like everyone involved in this makes a conscious effort to be mindful of LGBT people and not to use those words and to call out people on those words. But I think if you say you're just some lad down in I don't know, Carndonagh, up in Donegal, and you're listening to Odhrán Johnson's fantastic podcast with two fine some lad from Kildare, and you're thinking, like, what can I do to better LGBT people's lives on a day-to-day basis? And if you go into school the next day and you hear someone saying the homophobic slur, the F homophobic slur, don't like curse them out. Don't roar and shout at them. Just have a chat with them and say, like, even if you're not LGBT, just say, you saying that word hurts people. Like, no more than the N word, no more than telling someone to F off or making fun of their appearance. It hurts them deeply, because every bit of insecurity, every bit of doubt that they have, and every bit of stress that they've gone through as an LGBT person manifests in that word, whether it's used as a colloquial or as a joke or in hate. Every time that they hear it, it hurts them. And if you do nothing for LGBT rights and all you do is go out there and maybe call out a few of your mates gently and tell them that this has to change, maybe they'll go and say it to a few of their mates. And I think stuff like that is really what will change, because we saw it with marriage equality, where people, it wasn't just knocking on doors, it wasn't just campaigning on social media, it was going down, having those tough conversations with your auntie and uncle or your granny and granddad and saying, like, these are regular people, these are people who want to exist. And if you were against this, you're against them existing as human beings and loving who they want to love. And like some people who, you know, went into the marriage equality debate might have had some sort of a sentiment of homophobia or thinking in the old way. And through conversations, they come through and see the light that these are just regular people. Like the stuff me, Tiernan and Inez and even yourself do, like all this big campaign, that's a necessity. It has to be done. Without that sort of thing, we wouldn't have seen today's vote in the Assembly. And we wouldn't see change. But if you talk about it just from a day-to-day perspective to making LGBT people's lives better and what average people can do, it's just being conscious that they're there and they have feelings. That's what I'd say anyway. Just start small if you can, and sure, if you want to get involved in some of the bigger stuff, we'll leave our number and our social medias there, you know. But that's all I'd have to say.
Another point to touch on is, you know, unfortunately for LGBT people, you're always going to have homophobia. There's always going to be people who don't accept it, people who have religious beliefs. But I think the important thing for us is, you know, telling these people, you cannot fix this. Even if you view it as sin or you view it as an abomination, there is nothing you can do to quote unquote fix it. You will be torturing someone. You know, the idea of supporting it, you are not supporting, you know, someone finding their faith in God or, you know, retouching with their straight side. No, you're supporting them being tortured. It's literal torture. It's like waking up every day and you're wearing a blue shirt and someone repetitively telling you, no, you're not wearing a blue shirt, you're wearing a red shirt. And you're like, but I know I'm wearing a blue shirt. You're not, like, you're eventually going to get to a point where someone's going to be completely, you know, they might even end up in a place where they're going insane or just can't understand anything because they're being told every day something's wrong. And I think even if you are at a religious level or a moral level fully against gay marriage and fully against, you know, equal rights and adoption and that kind of stuff, you can't sit back as a moral person and say that conversion therapy is okay, because you are sitting back and saying, I, with my morals, agree with torture.
I think up here and up north as well, like the change does start in the small things. And like Tiernan said, it's torture, whether it's your religious beliefs or not. And I think we saw I think the loud religious voices in the assemblies from the DUP kind of insinuated that religious people are for conversion therapy. But there's a lot of other religious people in that assembly who are against it and who want it banned. Like there's a lot of, obviously I don't know everyone in the religions in the assembly's religion, but a lot of SDLP MLAs are saying I'm religious and I want conversion therapy banned. It's torture. Like, love thy neighbor for a reason. You're supposed to take care of other people and you're supposed to love them. And like you said, like, was it 370 religious leaders have said conversion therapy cannot go ahead. It's listening to what it really is, and it's having that level of respect and calling out your friends and speaking out on things as well. That's where the change happens, to speak out on things and say, you know what, this isn't okay, and what else can I do? And especially if you are an ally, like, this can't be reiterated enough. It's not just for LGBTQ plus people, it's for all of us. It's for everyone in society to really take this on and to really say, this is not okay. Even if you're not gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender or any kind, it's not okay for anyone to go through that at all. And you just have to speak up on it and speak out. And do you know what? Email your MLAs, give them a call, email them, just say, I really do not believe that conversion therapy should be allowed to be legal, or I do not believe that the level of trans healthcare in Northern Ireland is acceptable. We need more funding in this sector. Email them and let them know, because you need to raise your voice, and that's what democracy is about. And I think it's just really campaigning and getting out there and saying, you know, this is not acceptable and I'm not going to accept it. And just letting them know, making democracy work.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure listening to all of you. I think anyone who's listened can hear that there are three very inspiring voices, whether you're listening or you're watching, behind this campaign, which is a campaign full of a large group of people. It's not just the SDLP. But one thing I would like to sort of finish off with, and this kind of goes against for a lot of points, is people always say, oh, if you're doing journalism stuff, you need to be 50-50. But I think for a lot of people listening here, like, there's no 50-50 to this. You're right. It's as Tierna mentioned and as Brian mentioned earlier on, it's a human rights issue. It's not just an LGBTQ issue. So with that in mind, sort of, where can people, first of all, where can they find you? And then second of all, if they really want to get involved and you've struck a chord with them here today, how can they do that as well?
So I think the best way to find us is we are on Twitter, because everyone seems to love Twitter. We're on all the main social medias. But on Twitter, we are the Anti-CT Coalition. And if you want to get involved, just message that page. We have kind of groups and stuff set up. So just message that page and we will get back to you with how to get involved. But please share our stuff. It's important that I think for the issue, it's kind of an issue where people don't realize it's an issue, because it's one of those things we want as many people to see it as possible, because once most people see it, they're going to be like, oh my God, how is this still allowed? So please share as much as you can and get as much traction on this as possible.
Perfect. Thanks again, guys. Brian, Tiernan, Inez, it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you so much.